Okay, hello, this is Richard. We're going to be doing another intermediate Blender tutorial where we talk about lighting. Lighting is so important for creating a realistic scene because even though you don't notice it, there is light bouncing all around our world, off of everything. Even in really, really dark scenes, there's still a lot of light. People think making things dark means leaving light out, when really it just means placing your lights a little bit differently. So, when you start a new file in Blender, you have this default light. And then if you just do a quick render of it, let's take a look. Let's focus on the cube here. And the best we can make it, oh, there we go. We've got a gray background. We've got one light source. It bounces off this. That's all. Looks like it's one side. Really boring. Couldn't be more boring. And then I've done this a few different times in a few different videos. If we give it a nice color, still there's nothing. If you put a material on here, it's going to look really flat. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Materials. Let's do an asphalt. Oh, I didn't unwrap it. My fault. Just a sec. I got it right. Okay. There's an asphalt. It looks really flat. This is still really dull. And then even if you try to improve it, bear with me for just a minute and then we'll get into the lighting. If we try to improve this with a normal map, open this up. Let's do the normal here. And then render this again. Still, it's one light source. It's not lit correctly. It's not that great. You're not going to get a great result from just this one light and this gray background. There's a few things that we need to think about and set up when we're doing lighting, just the same as there's things we need to think about when we're setting which angle we take our image from, or when we're figuring out where to put our edge loops. It deserves just as much thought as the rest of what you're doing. So let's get out of this and let's start making our lights. Now there's a few things that I want you to think about when we're doing lighting. So I've created a few different websites here. This is 3-point lighting. Let's talk about this. This is my cube here in the middle, and you have a key light. This is your main light, and it puts the most amount of light on your object, lighting up pretty much your scene and your main focal point. This fill light, we'll talk about that last. The backlight lights it from behind, so it stands out from the background. And standing out from the background really gives emphasis to the thing that you want to focus on in your renders. You can also do that with depth of field, but we're not talking about that right now. It's going to give you a little halo effect. And then last we have the fill light. Oftentimes this will just be a reflective piece of foam board, like a glossy white piece of foam board that'll just bounce light to fill in the shadows of their face. If you take a picture out in the sunlight, then you will notice that it's really harsh. Because it's a unidirectional lighting system. It's bouncing off of you, and it's going to produce harsh shadows, and that fill light is really bouncing in there to fill that in. So here's a good example of sunlight and how it creates these harsh shadows right in here along her face. And this isn't even full sunlight. She's behind a window and some blinds, and you can see some fill light is being bounced in here off of this white furniture. If this was just out on the grass that absorbs all the light, you get really dark shadows, and that's why you need this fill light. So then there's also 4-point lighting. This is 3-point, key light, backlight, fill light, and then your camera would be right here to get the best angle on all of those lights, even maybe over here. Here's 4-point lighting. And did you notice the difference? It just adds in a background light to light up the world around your object. And we can cheat this by using an HDRi. I've talked about those before, and I have a quick tip on how to get them and add them and use them for your renders to get really good world lighting. So we're going to focus on 3-point lighting, and then we're going to add in an HDRi to take care of this background light. So why is lighting important? Let me show this to you by using chiaroscuro. chiaroscuro is a play between light and dark, and you can see I like this example because it shows the darkness here contrasting with the light bouncing off of his face. Chiaro and scuro, light and dark. It's the interplay between shadows and light. And when it's heightened and used for dramatic purposes, it's a style called chiaroscuro. And then here's the light and here's the dark again between those shadows. You'll most often see this in film noir. And this is the iconic scene with the blinds making a shadow across the subject. It's that interplay between light and dark. They look like they're trapped in a cage. It's thoughtful repose. You're always thinking something. There's always something going on. It creates a really dramatic, striking scene. And it's this interplay between light and dark. You see it in Chinatown. That is why lighting is so important and why it's always an important part of any movie or photograph that you look at. And here's chiaroscuro again. See, this whole portrait of this person is pretty dark, almost black, and you see this fence contrasted with the blackness behind it. It's a lot of negative space. When you have this wide picture, there's nothing going on here except a pattern. All that's going on is right here. But it creates dramatic interest by having layers. There's this negative space where there's nothing, and that's broken up by this chiaroscuro play between light and dark. And then here again, there's this dark portrait that's out of focus against this light. And then another thing that we want to keep in mind is every picture you see that's lit, you see here's the key light coming in from this side on this cute baby, and then here's the fill light filling in those harsh shadows, and you can see a distinct shape of the head apart from the background because there is a background light there. That one's harder to notice, but it is very important. I'd say it's the second most important part. The fill light, probably just as important as the backlight. And what I want you to look at are the eyes. That's called catch lighting. Every movie or photograph you'll see that catches your interest has this catch light. You'll see it bouncing off of their eyes because their eyes catch the light. And you can see in here the reflection of a window. If we zoom in, see, that's just a window that they're using for this lighting source as the fill light for this baby's face. Or for the key light, sorry. The key light is just this window giving the primary source of light, and his eyes are catching this light, so that's called a catch light. You'll always see the light reflected in characters' eyes in movies and photography because it brightens up their eyes and it lights their face correctly. It gives life to the subject, and that's really important as well. I have this same baby with no catch light, and you can see how the picture itself looks a little bit more dull. The baby's face isn't as of much of interest as it was with the catch light, and it's so important. You see the fill light's not quite as good because the angle of the key light's a little bit off and the light isn't bouncing quite right in here. So these are just things that we want to think about when we set up our lighting. Is this three-point system. The key light is your main light, fill light to fill in the shadows left behind from your key light, and the backlight to fill in and give it a halo on the back. So now let's jump into Blender and we can look at why our lighting is so wrong, because we just have a key light. There's no background light or world lighting, and there's no fill light to fill in these shadows and give a little more contrast. There's no backlight either. And how can we fix this? Well, first let's add in our world light here. Real quick, environment, texture, open, navigate to your HDRs, and let's just do the Milky Way. And this is going to take care of a few problems right away. See, now we have contrast between the two sides. They're lit a little bit separately, and you have this differently colored light from the Milky Way bouncing off each of these sides. And then this side is still lit brightly from our key light. And then, well, nothing floats in the air unless it is space. So let's just add in a plane here. Whoops, I did that in edit mode, so let's just make it its own object. And then we are just going to, oops, we're just going to do a new material. How's about, whoops. There we go. And we're just going to throw a checker texture on there. And I was saying chiaroscuro a lot. It's kind of hard to recognize what that word is. Here I've got Oh, I moved my camera around. Let's turn our world off. I've got an example with the word written out. And it took my material off of that too. Well, we'll just add it back. Chiaroscuro. It's the interplay between light and darkness. Chiaroscuro. It's just something to think about, how much of that contrast you want and where you want it coming from. And you can see how I did this with just one spotlight coming from one side. So, all right. Then, I should have made a separate camera for that. Oh well. We've got our plane here, and we've got some default colors. I never leave this on the default colors. Maybe we'll talk about colors here in a while. Now we've got, oops, let's get rid of this grease pencil. Now we've got some light bouncing from the stars coming from above. We've also got the key light bouncing off of this, and you can see there's some more yellows and some blues being reflected in this as well. So, we can do better. I like to use quad view for this, and let's just make that full screen. Just hit shift space there. It makes whatever window you're in full screen. Now, if we zoom out a little bit, you can see our lights, and let's just hide that for now. You know what? I don't want the cube. Sorry, I'm being particular. I want Suzanne. Should show this quite a bit better if we use Suzanne. She's very low poly, not great topology, but it'll look better. All right, now we've got the front, so we want this to be, think about when you go to a portrait studio, how many lights you see, where they're positioned, and how they're positioned to direct light on you. Move this in front of the subject. So that it's striking the subject. And let's take a look. You see all these shadows here? This is where we're going to put our fill light to fill in those shadows. You can see the key light coming in from this direction, and then we have the world light bouncing off of this plane, going in all around here. Whoops, I missed a spot of that grease pencil. There we go. So then from the top, you see the camera here. And let's just, I'll do it over here. Move it to capture a bit more of that key light. And then from the top, let's put our 3D cursor there, Shift A, and add another lamp. I like point lights, because you can put it kind of close to really fill that in. And then we can go into Shift C. Let's turn our world back on. Now that point light might be a little bit bright. See how it's blowing out our features? They're all too bright. So let's go here to point light. And let's take this strength and let's turn it down to 25. Maybe even 15. We just want to fill in those shadows. We don't want it to be too much light to overtake the key light. There we go. And now it's right on the floor. So let's get out of this and let's go here and let's bring it up just a bit. The one thing that you never want to do is underlight your subjects, because a little bit of history, Hitler took people that had physical deformities and he underlit them to make them look evil in propaganda films. And it's commonly used to make people look evil. And unless that's what you're wanting, it's a specific purpose, you don't want to do it. So I'm pulling up a few examples here, and let's just look at them. Here's an underlit face. You see how it highlights the face differently and gives you shadows here on the cheekbones, and lights the eyes differently, showing all the bags and wrinkles of the face. It makes you look evil. And then here's another good example of correct key lighting and underlighting. The difference that it does. This pretty girl looks evil when she's underlit, like maniacal and mischievous. So that is why you don't want to underlight your subjects. There are whole college courses based around lighting correctly, and it's really something that you can go really deep into. So I just want to give you a quick overview here because it's still going to take a while just to set up this 3-point lighting system and get it looking exactly how we want it. Now let's Shift D and let's pull one of these over here for our backlight. And we'll probably want this to be a little more powerful than our fill light. Let's take a quick look. It's just a quick render. More samples will make this look a lot better. But just to get an idea and see how this is really starting to stand out from our background because we put that backlight on. This fill light's filling out those shadows. The key light's lighting up the face. And doesn't she look happy? Okay. And that's really the basics. If you look at this arrangement here, light, light, light. What does this look like? Well, this looks like our 3-point lighting system. Only we swapped the key light and the fill light. We have the key light coming from here and the fill light over here. And that's perfectly fine to do. So let's go ahead and do it how they have it, just reversed a little bit, and see if our results change. I think I'm a little close to really get that halo effect. And that light's a little above her head as well. So, whoops. Let's just lower that a little bit. And if you want more control over the direction of your lights, then choose the spotlight or choose the sun and make it smaller. Here, let's switch this one to a sun and let's leave it at that. Let's turn this down to 2 and then let's go into quad view because we have to rotate this the correct direction. There we go. And let's take a look. There you go. And now you can see there's this line here that separates her from the background that she's on. That's because of that backlight. The world is lighting up this background to bounce some light off her as well. You can see speckles of yellow in here coming from the ground. The fill light is filling in these shadows and the key light is lighting her face. That's the basics of it. Now, what I was talking about, the catch light. What to do about that? I mean, yeah, you might get lucky with the right angles here. You might reflect a little bit of light, or you might just get some fireflies. So just add in a sphere, and let's shrink it way down, and go to Materials, New, and let's change this shader to Emission. Let's just make that like a 5, make it nice and bright. There you go. And now let's go to good old Suzanne, and let's add some materials in here, and let's do two materials. We're going to leave her, and we're going to make her brown, like a good monkey. But then we're going to go into edit mode and select her eyes and assign this other color that we're going to make glossy. And it's going to look a little weird, but she's going to have blue glass eyes. So you can see some of the environment, and you can see the stars, and right there we've got our catchlight. Now she's not smooth shaded, so if we go back and go to our shading, smooth shade her eyes, and we can look up here to make sure that we've got that catchlight reflected in her eyes correctly. You can see right here it added it on the plane, so we want to go ahead and grab that and move it, whoops, not her eyeballs, grab that and move it up. And probably around until it's reflected in her eyes from our camera point. Let's get out of this, and you can actually put it right here on the lines of your lights from the directions they're coming in. Now let's render this and we can look at it closer. There and there you have some catchlights. And that simulates those cameras, and you can make these bigger or smaller, make them any shape you want, just make them emissive so that they reflect from the direction of your lights to really bring life to your characters. So, if you want something different, if you want chiaroscuro, more of it, well, let's go back in here and let's just turn this off. Let's take this light. Where is it? Here let's turn it off the render. And now we've got those harder shadows, as you can see. And then let's go in here and let's turn off the world. Take it from 1 to 0. So now we just have the light that's reflected off of this background, not even the world lighting, so we don't have the background lighting at all in this now. Just our two emissives to brighten up the eyes and the face, and the backlight and the key light. Well then, what if we take this backlight completely off? Let's turn that one off as well. You can see how dramatic it gets. There's less light bouncing off of our background world, and it's all coming from this direction. You see the interplay between dark and light, and that's how you get this heightened drama, if that's what you're looking for. And then let's go ahead and turn those back on so that you can see the difference. And put our world back on 1. Because you definitely want to have a lot of light, and you want to have it coming from the right places so that the things that you want to focus on are focused on by the light. And see, now that we have this fill light in here, we could even turn up our key light and fill light. So this one's the fill light. Let's turn that up to 2, double that, and let's go up here to our basic lamp that we're using for our key light. Turn that up to 5. Now we have a nice portrait. maybe I'm selecting these lights wrong. That one's 0.1, we have it at 1. That one is point, we have it at 1. This one, let's leave that at 2. The spot, oh, that's on a different scene. And then we have regular lamp. Let's just turn that up to 3 or 4. And see, you just have to play with these things until it looks right. Because now the more levels of light that you have, the more washed out your figure is going to become, and maybe you want that. Maybe you want to highlight the whole face. Maybe you want to change things minorly based on their position, or you want to wash out this face and make the background really light or dark. You just have to worry about where your lights are, how you're using them, to get things exactly how you want, pretty much. Because we can go take this background light. I do have it as a sun. That should be, let's make it a spotlight. That's why the background keeps lighting up so much. And you have these different types of lights as well. See, now you can see the spotlight ring here. Just different ways to light things so that you get the right amount of light, and then you can go and you can change the contrast and things once you've created your final render. And now you see how it's all noisy here. That's because of my render settings. Let's turn it up to 300, and I'm going to turn my clamp on, which is going to clamp the indirect light when it bounces, so it should be less noisy. And that's basically it. That's the basics for setting up your lighting. And like I showed you with those spheres for emissive, you can do those with planes as well. And then, oh heck, let me show you. Let's add in a plane. And let's rotate this on the x-axis, because we're going to use it to light up Suzanne's face. And look, it's going to block the camera. But that's okay. Now let's scale it along the X to make it a little wider, just like that. And we're going to move this one in closer so that it's still reflected. You'll see this plane in her eyes as well. So maybe let's move it down a little bit so you don't see it as much. Rotate it on the X just a tad more. You can see it here to light her face straight on. We're going to take a material, new, oh no, let's just use this emissive that we already have. There we go. And if we render it, we're going to see this big plane. So we're going to go to, where is it? Ray visibility and turn off camera. And now you can see the results of this. Let me turn my samples down so that it goes faster. You can see the plane reflected in her eyes, and it lights up her face fully, just like if you had a diffuse panel. That's another photography trick. They take this big transparent white piece of plastic and they put it over their flash so that it lights up the whole white piece of plastic and diffuses that light over that whole piece of plastic and shines it more uniformly instead of just from one point. And you can see how it fills in her face, and you can see less of the shape of the polygons now because it's straight smack dab on her face. That's another technique to use as well when you're lighting static models, especially like cars and things like that. You would want to use a lot of these planes and make sure you turn them off. Here, you go to Object Options, turn off the ray visibility on the camera so that it doesn't show up. You can also do this with the world. Down here on ray visibility, turn it off if you don't want to see the background. and it'll still bounce the light from the world. You'll see it in the reflections, like in our eyes. So that's that. That's all I'm going to talk about with lighting. Hopefully you got a good idea about how to light things better so that you can get a better result with your renders, and we'll see you in the next video.